Good morning. All right. So, this is a text that might actually be of interest to some of you because there's, I don't know, thinking. So, in the church today, there are different ways that people interpret biblical texts. There's different ways of interpreting the Bible, just general ways. A hermeneutic, the art and science of biblical interpretation. And so when people look at a text, some people take it very literally. Some people lean to typically take things allegorically. Well, that's, symbolic. It's symbolic. I take things more literally. Like, there's a lot of symbolic stuff, but usually it's very clearly symbolic. And other times things are said pretty plainly, and I just try and take those things plainly. And what we find is that when it comes to the end times, that's where this really plays out. There are those, really, if you want to break things really into just two sections, because there's the millennium, which in Revelation, it speaks of 1,000-year reign of Christ. And some people take that to mean a literal 1,000 years. And they're called premillennial, meaning that we're living in a time before that 1,000 years. And you're going to wonder how this gets back to Numbers 19. You'll see in a second. And then there's the amillennial and postmillennials, which in short view that period of time as symbolic, that there's not going to be a real 1,000 years. And anything in the Bible that speaks of that time period is just symbolic of really the age in which we live right now. And so I actually, by chance, had a post on Isaiah 11 from my McShane reading the other day, and just that, talks about the idea of the animals becoming tame, and the nursing child playing by the viper's hole and with the cobra, and that the idea is that during that period of time, animals will go back to kind of their pre-fall condition where everything was a peaceful. Adam and Eve could play with everything and they were all peaceful. So backing up though, in the premillennial camp though, and more even specifically premillennial, pre-tribulational, the rapture and all that, oftentimes some of the biggest arguments against the rapture, premillennial, all that, is the sheer fact that to understand how all these prophecies fit together, you have to understand your Bible well. You actually have to go through and read all these prophecies. And I'll just be bold to say that across the board in the church today, biblical literacy is not great. The average Christian doesn't know their Bible as well as they ought to. And I sometimes feel like I'm biased because as a pastor, but not just because I'm a pastor, because God called me ahead of time to be a pastor, he wired me in such a way. And so sometimes I think my God-given wiring makes me biased, feel like everyone needs to be, as smart as me or something. But it's like, well, no, that's not what I mean. I understand that maybe I'm going to be uniquely called to deeper understanding. But when people don't know, here's the deal. The flood. The world mocks the idea of a worldwide flood because of the fact that it's fantastical. In fact, my friend, who was an atheist at the time and became a believer later, that's a word he always used to say. The Bible is so fantastical. All these, supernatural things that are just hard to believe. And so, even in the church, in some ways, it's easier to believe that everything's just going on the way it has gone and it's just going to keep going on this way, is more natural and easier to believe than the rapture of the church and 7 years of tribulation and 1,000-year reign of Christ and animals being made tame. And that's all really hard to believe. And so even within the church, I think there's a mocking of taking the Bible literally and believing these promises. But when the Christian is challenged in, well, how do you know that's true? A lot of Christians can't give a good answer. And so many people have left the pre-mill, pre-trib rapture view simply because they didn't understand it And so they went to an easier to swallow theology. That's my biased opinion. If you're listening to this and you're amillennial, whatever, you know I'm crazy and you just leave it at that. And so, and I jokingly say, because I usually don't care to really split hairs over this stuff, but when it comes up, I'll teach it the way I believe is true. All that said, right, I've done half my time just on an introduction. And what it comes down to is that there's always this excitement in the prophecy world and in the pre-mill camp, typically around the red heifers. And that's where we're at today at Numbers 19, is the red heifers. And people always know there's something about a red heifer. Look, they found a red heifer. Like, what does that mean? I don't know, but I know it's important. And I feel like that's oftentimes what you see in the church, is people like, there's something about a red heifer. I know it's biblical and it's prophecy, but I just don't know what it is. And so right here, chapter 19 of Numbers, verse 1. Now the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, this is the ordinance of the law which the Lord has commanded the children of Israel. Speak to the children of Israel, saying that they bring you a red heifer without blemish, in which there's no defect, and on which a yoke has never come. You shall give it to Eleazar the priest, that he may take it outside the camp. It shall be slaughtered before him. Eleazar shall take some of its blood with his finger and sprinkle some of its blood 7 times directly on the tabernacle of meeting. Then the heifer shall be burned in his sight, its hide, its flesh, its blood, its offal shall be burned. The priest shall take cedar wood, hyssop, scarlet, cast them in the midst of the fire, burning it. Notice it's just for what it's worth. Hyssop, scarlet, cedar. These are all the same things used in the cleansing of the leper. And I think we go back to the whole thing with the cross of Jesus. And he was on the cross. They used hyssop to bring that drink up to him. Our sins as scarlet were upon him. He's hanging on the cedar tree. Anyway, so it's fascinating. These things are in different places. The priest shall wash his clothes. Wash his clothes, bathe in water. After we should come into the camp, the priest shall be unclean till evening. Verse 9. And a man who shall clean and gather the ashes of the heifer and store them outside the camp in a clean place. And they shall be kept for the congregation of Israel, for the water of purification is for the purifying from sin. And the one who gathers the ash of the heifer shall wash his clothes. The long story short, purifying. They take the running water, sprinkle 7 times, purification, sprinkled, unclean, purified. Okay. That's the rest of chapter 19. It's just basically the rest of the stuff is all about the people being purified. So what's the deal with the red heifer? It is that for the cleansing of the temple, because it's on the tabernacle, right, which would later be at the temple. They would do the same ceremony with the temple. To create this water of purification needed for temple ceremonies, they needed a red heifer. Now, there's 2 sides of this coin. So the Temple Institute, right, or whatever it's called, they have been preparing and they have like all the stuff ready to build the 3rd temple. They're ready to rock and roll. They're ready to build. I've seen some of the stuff, not all of the stuff. And with that, they need a red heifer. Now today, with the way some of the ultra-Orthodox Jews are, I feel like they're a little bit overkill when it comes to the perfection of the red heifer. I honestly think when the Jews did this back in this period of time, that they more than likely found a good-looking red heifer that seemed pretty legit, no obvious flaws, no defects, right? That was the idea. And they used it, and they just went on with their business, obeying God and trying to do it. Today, they had to find like a pure red heifer. You find one off-color hair, and it's disqualified. And so now it's like this big deal when they find a real red heifer, and they finally found a red heifer that would work. And they found one like not a while back, and everyone acted like the temple was going to get built all of a sudden, like this was the prophecy we've been waiting for. This is where also, I think, people in the pre-tribulational rapture camp, of which I'm in, have given a sour taste to other people because sometimes they hype stuff up. Let's just say it, guys. I think we're known for getting all excited about prophecy and then nothing happens. All excited about prophecy and nothing happens. Of course, Jesus describes birth pangs, where frequency and intensity of the contractions, before his coming. So some of that should all be expected. But sometimes I think people are tired of people continually like getting all excited about something and then nothing happening, which is why I don't find myself easily excitable. In fact, I was just shared a video last night about this is it, this could be prophecy. And it's like, yeah, we've seen lots of other prophecies coming true too. We shouldn't be surprised. It should be expected. But at the same time, I don't think there's a single prophecy that has to happen before the rapture. Whether the third temple gets built before the rapture or after, I think after, but that just timeline's better, but it's not really law. You see, the Antichrist likely will be the one who helps the building of that third temple. But whether he does that before he comes out of the box as the Antichrist or not, or maybe he doesn't help them. That's more of just like a logical and traditional thing. It's not really scriptural. He confirms a covenant with many for a week, for 7 years. That makes sense. But beyond that, there's the red heifer. So now if you hear people talking about the red heifer and all this excitement, you understand that it was simply one of the things needed to get the temple running. They had to have a red heifer to burn. Its blood would be used for sanctifying in the temple, and then its ashes would be mixed in with the water to create the water of purification needed for temple ceremonies. If they keep being so picky about their red heifers, they might run out of that water quick and be waiting and searching for a new red heifer. So Numbers 19, the red heifer, there you all go. God bless. Tomorrow, Moses' error at Kadesh. Not good. I'll see you guys then.